Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see you all so close to the holidays. So I appreciate you making the time to join us. We'll be going over some of the key milestones for the Fresno County Comprehensive Climate Action Plan, or CCAP for short. This is the second element of our overall climate pollution reduction grant that we received from EPA, totaling $1 million to do a countywide climate action plan, since Fresno is designated one of the largest metropolitan statistical areas in the nation. We've partnered again with LSA and SSG, and now for the CCAP Southwest strategies on developing this work. So here are some of the core project managers, and there's others that filter in and assist. I'll just start with my own introduction, and then I'll pass it over to Jessica and the team that we have online today. So my name is Simran Judy. I'm a principal planner here at Fresno COG. I've been managing the project since it began back in, I believe it was July of 2023. So it's been really exciting and great to connect beyond just transportation and inviting other sectors that are a part of the GHG emissions in our county. And I want to thank all of you for either being new members to the Stakeholder Steering Committee or former members from our last project, which was the PCAP. So with that, I will turn it over to Jessica to introduce and start today's conversation.
Thanks so much, Simon. So I'm Jessica Correa. I'm the Director of Air Quality and Climate Change Services here at LSA. We also have Christine Kai as our project advisor for this effort. She's not able to join us for the call today, but she has been involved with the project efforts to date, and will be providing a little bit of a background, just a review of the development phase of the CCAP and our schedule before we jump into some modeling results and then an outreach update for today's agenda. But before we do that, I want to hand it over to the other members of our team who are here today for introductions. So I will hand it over to our outreach partners for the project, Southwest Strategies, and Rachel Adino can do a brief introduction for Southwest.
Hi, this is Jessica Ludernauer. Actually, I'm filling in for Rachel today. I'm really happy to be here. We are handling the public outreach for this project, like Jessica said, working to gather stakeholder feedback, and look forward to the discussion today.
Thanks, Jess. And then I'll hand it over to Kayla to kick off introductions from our SSG team.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kayla Rakes, and I'm a senior consultant here at SSG. I've been leading the project on our side and working closely with our modeler, Esteban, who's on the call as well.
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm Esteban Soto, so I'm senior modeler at SSG, so I'm in charge of all the modeling part of the project.
Great. Thanks, Kayla. Thanks, Esteban. So we will be hearing more from Kayla and Esteban here for the presentation on the modeling. But before we do that, I did want to just provide a quick background. I know it's been a while since we've gotten together with the stakeholder group. So again, big thank you for everyone for being here and taking time out of your week to join this effort. I know a bunch of us have been involved with the Priority Climate Action Plan, or PCAP, development. Just to provide not a bad joke, but a recap on the PCAP. This was submitted to EPA back in March of 2024. And the purpose of the PCAP was, it's called a Priority Climate Action Plan. It was really to prioritize climate action in Fresno County and help position Fresno County agencies for grant funding. And that was kind of the target of the plan. So the CCAP is a second phase of that CPRG program. And the CCAP is really designed to provide more targeted insight into the emissions inventory in Fresno County, as well as broader look at what could potentially be done to reduce emissions across all sectors in the county, not just those kind of top sectors that we identified in the PCAP. So just kind of keeping that in mind as we're going through and talking about these next stages, and the purpose of the CCAP is really to look at all sectors, significant greenhouse gas sources and sinks, and look at both near and long-term GHG emission reduction goals and strategies. So just to provide some insight from EPA and the difference from the PCAP, the CCAP is really building off that foundation that the PCAP set to update and expand an understanding of those regional greenhouse gas sources and sinks, establishing those near-term and long-term GHG emission reduction targets, looking at reduction measures that could be achieved across all economic sectors. And then there's specific requirements for looking at co-benefits, such as reductions in air pollution or potential increases in criteria pollutants that we want to be taking account of for all communities, and then focusing on low-income and disadvantaged communities, as well as understanding funding mechanisms and workforce needs in the county. So kind of a comprehensive look at what are these measures, what could be developed, and then what does the implementation of those measures look like? So to review our progress to date and project schedule, we've been actively working on the refinement of the greenhouse gas emissions inventory that was created for the PCAP, really looking at more specific county data. In some cases, building a county emissions inventory for different sectors if that wasn't available before, instead of using what was available for the state. And I'm excited to turn that over to Kayla for a little bit more discussion here and a couple of slides. But then from that emissions inventory, projecting the emissions out to key milestone years in the future and seeing how that emission inventory is projected to change across sectors. While we've been doing that on the technical side, we've also been kicking off the stakeholder and public engagement phase. So initial meetings with the stakeholder steering committee group, which will be continuing, as well as starting our public engagement process. And so Jessica will be providing the update related to that public outreach and what's on the horizon for next steps for targeted public outreach here at the kind of the end of the meeting. Our next stage is going to be moving into visioning and goal setting. So really looking to hear from the public about what types of emission reduction measures we want to see implemented in communities, and working with you all to see kind of what the priorities should be in the county and what should be incorporated in the plan. And so just a review of the schedule here, we are in December, closing out to the end of the year quickly. And so we've been on track with that greenhouse gas emissions inventory development and the projections. And then now we are starting work on developing potential measures, and we're going to be looking for stakeholder and public input on that next stage here in the coming months. So with that overview, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Kayla, who's going to be providing an update on the modeling efforts. If I can get Zoom to cooperate here. Sorry, Kayla, feel free to take over that too. But Kayla is going to be providing an update on that inventory and the GHG projections and what's that looking like for the county.
Hey everyone, can you see my screen? No.
Yes, we
Yeah.
can.
Oh, okay. For some reason I'm still seeing Jessica's screen. Alrighty, well, so we're excited to share this next phase of the project, looking at the business as usual and business as planned modeling results. So just an overview of what our agenda is for today. We'll do an introduction, kind of overview of the project timeline, where we're at, the meeting objectives, and then we'll jump into an overview of our modeling process. So Esteban will kind of walk us through how we develop the model. And then we'll be talking about the results. So looking at the business as usual and business as planned results and a comparison between the two, and then diving into the next steps. So just quickly looking at the overview of the project timeline here. Right now, as Jessica mentioned, We're in the modeling phase, so we've just modeled the BAU and BAP, and we'll be looking to develop some actions and measures to input into the low carbon scenario. So how do we get to that net zero um, by 2045 for Fresno County? And with that, we'll be doing some sorts of engagements that'll be run by Southwest. And then in the spring, we'll be kind of using this modeling to understand the potential benefits that we can get from these types of actions. So looking at co-benefits, additional workforce opportunities, any financial savings or costs that are going to come along with these, and then aligning those with the community priorities in Fresno. And then over the summer, we'll be building out the CCAP, kind of putting that all together, writing the draft, and working with you all as well to kind of get that final input, and then finalizing it in the fall and delivering by December 1st, 2025 is the goal here. And for our meeting objectives today, we just want the steering committee to understand the BAU and BAP results and the modeling process. We want to make sure you all have an opportunity to give input on the results, ask questions. Maybe there's a blaring hole we missed, and you guys have that insight that you can give us. And then also just want to make sure that you all understand each step of the process and what the next phase of this process will be. So with that, I'll hand it over to Esteban to go over the modeling.
Okay, thank you, Kayla. So I'm going to start with an overview of the modeling approach. So basically, to begin, how we model our future scenario that Kayla was talking about. So basically, we have our own tool. So our tool is called Sena Model. So we designed this tool, and basically this tool helps us to map out the consequences of different type of policies or actions, and we can quantify the impact of those actions, the cost and the benefit. And basically, this is based on a system dynamic model. So we used to incorporate like different feedback loops. We are capturing the interaction between different variables, for example, like energy use, like buildings, transportation, population growth, and greenhouse emissions. So it's a complex model where all the variables are interacting between them, and we are using those to project different scenarios. So, but the next question is basically what it is and what is an scenario. So basically, when we talk about scenarios, we are exploring different possible futures for Fresno County. So these scenarios can help us to understand what may happen under a different type of policy or under a different type of action. And after that, we have how we build these scenarios. So you can go to the next slide. So basically, in this chart, you can see it shows the wedges that basically represent different type of actions, like for example, building efficiency or an increase on renewable energy. So basically, the width of each of wedges represent the total emission reduction from that action. So while the stack that you see over there show how this action can collectively achieve the net zero emission. So we can see here that we are starting for a little bit over for 100 in this example, and then we are going to reach out the net zero emission. This is an example one. Then we are going to be some of these type of chart for the modeling of the VIP. So if you go to the next slide, so another important part of the model is the cost and benefit. Again, this is an example of the chart. Then when we are analyzing the different low carbon scenarios, we're going to see a chart similar to this for the result of the model. So, but basically this plot is the marginal cost of abatement, again, the quantity of emission reduced. So basically it's a mind to provide a visual look tool for prioritizing emission reduction strategies. So basically, for every additional dollar that we are investing in a specific climate action, we are going to have a specific amount of tons of CO2 carbon emission that are being reduced for that action. So also it's important to know that the negative cost means that their implementation result in a net profit over this period of interest. So basically in some action, we're going to have some of them that are going to create an positive economic impact, and others that are not going to create a positive economic impact, but are going to impact in the emission reduction. After that, we do have the different model scenarios. So I think this is important to clarify at the beginning. So the first one that we have is the business as usual. That basically is a scenario that assume no significant policy change. So everything as it is right now, we are not changing any of the current policies. The next scenario is the business has planned. In this scenario, we incorporate all the intent climate policies and that have already been approved, so are ready to be implemented. And we quantify those for the projections. And then we are going to be reviewing these two first in this session today, the business as usual result and the business as planned. And then for in the following year, we are going to be developing the low carbon scenario that basically in this scenario, we incorporate all the new ambitious initiatives that are going to be implemented in the future, but they are not approved yet. Then again, as an example of the assumption, we have, for example, for the BAU, the business as usual, we assume that higher cars are going to be used. We are going to have more people, more household. That means that we're going to have more heating and cooling need, more cars, more waste. And for example, for the business as planned scenario, we are going to assume that we are going to be incorporating more renewable energy or some electric vehicles, or we're going to be like adding like some increase the efficiency of some of the buildings. So there are some actions that are already been approved. Another example for the actions for the low carbon scenario, for example, is going to be like move shift to walking, to biking, or different transit. Or we are going to be able to have like net zero grid electricity. We are going to be incorporating more electric vehicles. So this is again just examples. We are going to be developing in the following months these low carbon scenario actions. Some of the general assumptions that are under all the scenarios. If you can go to the next slide, please. Some of the one of the areas that are some of the key drivers that we have for the missions are the population growth. In this key case, we are using the projection from Fresno. So it's projected to increase by 40%, 14% the population, and also we are modeling like an increase in jobs by 20% and personal vehicle use by 15%. So also this trend means that we are going to be having more housing, need more housing, more transportation, and also that means that we are going to have an increase in the energy demand in the following years. Another key assumption that we use is the impact of the climate change by itself. So basically, we are going to be having like hotter summers and milder winters. That means that it's going to increase the air conditioner use while it's going to be reducing the heating need. So with this shift, we are going to significantly impact the Fresno energy demand. And this is highly important for the future climate condition and the modeling that we are going to be doing for the following years. Next, we are going to be presenting some of the results for the business as usual scenario. I want to clarify that the new inventory, basically updated inventory from the key pickup, is the same that the baseline that we are using for the business as usual and the business has planned, and also is going to be the baseline for the low carbon scenario. So basically, all the results that you are going to be seeing here for the 2019 are the result of the updated scenario, but plus the projection from now to 2050. So to start, we are going to start with the assumptions. So as we talked before, we have the general assumption that we are going to have more people because we are going to have an increase in the population. That means that we are going to be having more households. And that means that also we are going to have an increase in the energy consumption for the buildings. I mean, more heating and more cooling need for these new buildings and also for the commercial building, for the new job creation that are going to happen. That also means that people are going to need to move from one place to another. They are going to need to move from their houses to their jobs. So that means more cars. And also, since we have more people, we are going to have more waste. So we are going to have more, and we need a need for more waste services. As I say, more people, more transportation, more housing, more employment, more social care. So everything is increasing in overall when population is increasing. And showing some of the first results for this total emission for compared with the VA in the VAU from 2019, that is our base year, to 2050. So we are seeing an increase of about 15% of emission. So we are starting with a 13.2 million tons of CO2 equivalent to 15.2. So basically, we are having a 2 tons of increase from 2019 to 2050. So, but the question is, what are the main sectors that are making an impact in those increasing emissions? So, if we are breaking this down by sector, the largest increase in emission are projected for transportation, industrial, and waste. And also, the main component of the emission in this case is transportation, that is having like alone is accounting for more than half of the total amount of emission. We are seeing also that one of the main areas that in the emission are agriculture, but also we are seeing a decrease in emission of agriculture over time from the base year to 2050. And I would say those are the main takeaway from the by sector. Another area that we want to analyze are the emission by fuel type. So we have different type of fuel type. We are seeing an increase in emission from every type of fuel type except for non-energy. Then this non-energy is not a specific fuel type. They are basically all the emission produced by agriculture and waste, and being the main one in that non-energy is agriculture. But in all the other sectors, we are seeing an increase on energy consumption and in emission by fuel type. So as we say before, more buildings will require more energy and also more heating and more cooling and more lighting and more energy consumption in general for each of the building. And we know that also building are important, so we are going to be showing some results by building by energy use and by sector. Building energy is projected to be increased like by 25%, and is mainly being driven by an increase of demand in heating, cooling, lighting. In the case of the commercial and residential building, there are some of the main areas in this case. They're in sky blue and purple. And then we also have the industrial sector that is being increased from the baseline to 2050. If we want to see a breakdown by energy use, so by energy by end use, we are analyzing all the buildings in the three different main sectors that we um, mentioned before, that the residential, commercial, and industry. We are seeing like a big increase in the industrial processes. That is because we are having an increase of emission, and in the industrial sector. And also, it's important to mention that we are having an increase in cooling, so an increase of 50% of space cooling, and also an increase um, of 39% in the industrial processes. As we mentioned before, that we are going to have like hotter summers according to the climate change projections. So that means that we are going to be needing more AC in the future. So that's why we're having this 50% of increase in the space cooling end use. The next area is transportation. So we are keeping on tracking. And basically, when we analyze the transportation emission by vehicle type, we see that emissions are projecting to rise significantly in that area. And also, it's important to mention that the transportation sector is the main emitter in Fresno right now. So we have an increase for the medium and heavy duty trucks that are contributing the most to the emissions of this sector. And also we are seeing like a slow adoption of electric vehicles. So that also means that it's exacerbating this trend of the increase of emission from the transportation sector. If we analyze the transportation sector by fuel type, we are going to see that we are not we are seeing a big increase in the diesel consumption, particularly for the heavy trucks, and also an increase for the gasoline consumption in the cars and light truck. But we are not seeing yet an increase in grid electricity. That is because of the still low adoption of EVs in Fresno County. So now I'm gonna pass it to Kayla. That's gonna be like showing some of the results for the BIP scenario.
Thanks, Esteban. Yeah, Steve, do you have a
I,
question?
I think we have a question from Steve.
Yeah, my question is how to be able to utilize the Q&A. I'm just dealing with the basic
Oh.
here. I tried to use it, I didn't want to interrupt or anything, and then it's like the trains left the station. There's a lot of information being provided, and a lot of questions, I think, that are being raised as it relates to some of the base assumptions as well. So the Q&A, it says no open questions, only hosts and panelists can see the questions, but how do we even initialize that to work?
I'm not sure, Simran, if you do have the technical wherewithal there.
I had the same question. I was trying to figure out. There's no chat. There's just Q&A.
Right.
And I can't figure out how to put any questions in there.
Oh, see, I don't have the same,
I think it may be because we're panelists. It's assuming we know everything, and only the questions would come from attendees. I don't know.
that could be why I think Zoom did change a bit, but I don't think I have the same controls because I'm the host, so I can't really see what you guys are seeing. Brenda, do you?
Yeah, no, you have to be a panelist,
Or
an attendee to write into the Q&A. So if you want, you can put me as an attendee. I'll ask a question and then you can all respond to it. And that gives you something that if you want to start a Q&A, but you have to have someone in there to do it.
okay, let me.
Does that solve, will we then also be able to put, like you're saying, we will respond by putting our questions in as responses? Okay.
Yeah. That'd be okay.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys want to ask your questions now or if you want to see the BAP results before we dive in.
Brenda, can you demote yourself on your own? Because I feel like the only option I have is, oh, there, you got it. Never mind. Okay. I was able to put her in there. It seems like there's a few questions. It looks like Steve might have a question, Sarah might have a question. So if it's all in Mohammed, so do you think we can just do a bit of a Q&A in between, Kayla? Would that be okay? Or
Yeah, that's no problem. We can do it in between. I just do want to say that some of your questions may be related to the BAP results. So just framing it that way. So the BAU and BAP are kind of distinct. So I'll just want to put this up here, maybe just give this little quick introduction about the BAP before we start the round of questions. So the BAP will be incorporating some of the policies and legislation that the state's already adopted. So that includes things like SB 100, Title 24, Clean Cars, Advanced Clean Cars 2. Some of those policies are integrated into the BAP. So you maybe didn't see some of the results of those in the BAU, which I know can be confusing for people sometimes. So just wanted to frame that there before we get the round of questions going.
is anybody else able to, oh, there you go. I could see Nicola typing. So yeah, we can use this as our chat Q&A forum where Brenda. So Steve, if you wanted to type in your question, Mohammed, if you wanted to just verbally ask your question, that would be all right as well.
Actually, I don't have a question right now.
Okay.
I'd like to take it offline, but I'd be very interested in seeing what the assumptions are that are built into the model. I'm a model freak. And, you know, there's base assumptions, I guess, that are built in for business as usual. There's what the state's intending to do, maybe at the county level as well, as for businesses planned scenario. It'd be very interesting just to see what the assumptions are or the inputs, they would say as well.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Steve, for that comment. I also just want to say, I think we touched on it earlier, but this part of the inventory making in the BAU is using more local data than the PCAP. So the PCAP was largely based on downscaling statewide data to Fresno County, and in this new modeling, we are using actually more local data. So looking at actual like energy usage, natural gas usage, and things like that coming from the county. And we work very closely with Simran and her team to make sure that well, they provided most of those data sources to us. So we relied heavily on them to make sure that the data is very based in the local realities and context, which is the basis of the model. So any other questions before we move on to the BAP?
I think Nicola has a question there in the chat. It's she stated it looks like in the breakdown of emissions by sector, everything except agricultural emissions increased. Why was ag an anomaly there?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Going back really quick. So agriculture, we ended up basing their projections on well, so for the inventory, we used emission factors for different crop types. So there are different crop, like there's different emission factors associated with cherries versus almonds versus pistachios, for example. So we went through and we collected all that data on how much had been harvested in the base year, and then applied those associated emissions factors. And from that, we were able to kind of create a CO2 or GHG factor for like per GDP. And we found that the best way to project agriculture emissions into the future was to look at projected GDP, or that was like the closest we had essentially to what would be realistic for the sector. So the county, excuse me, Fresno Cog had already been using some data from REMI modeling. So we aligned with what they had been using as agricultural outputs and GDP expectations, and then applied those GHG emissions to those GDPs over time. So there is an expectation, I think, in the future that agriculture won't be producing as much, won't be as robust as it currently is, and so those emissions are those considerations are applied here, if that makes sense.
I had my hand up. Going back to ag in that slide and the reductions. Just some question in respect to it. Is that because of this whole thing about the amount of land that's going to be cultivated? Or in other words, total acreage in production? Or is it emissions that are measured as renewable versus non-renewable? Again, this may be getting in, I won't say the weeds, but really getting into when you have a input, a certain assumption, and then it's extrapolated over time. If it's not taken into account other factors, in this case, the law changed where all farm equipment that operates on diesel has to be 100% renewable.
Yeah,
Yes.
that, like, for example, that assumption with that law passage, that's included in the BAP.
And then,
But this is just projections for GDP that are tied to emissions.
uh, well, there's one other aspect, and my apologies, but there's also open air burning that is legal until 2025, 30 days from now, or less, actually. Can't count very well. But the point being is there's no open air burning after the end of this year. So I think that goes back to somebody was asking, well, why is the ag component decreasing by 2050 by the amount shown there? Would those be the two factors?
If I can, yeah, basically for the agricultural assumption, as Kayla said before, we were using the REMI assumption for the increase in the GDP. So we associate this increase or decrease projection in the GDP to the amount of crop that are going to be produced. So that means that in the future it's expected that less crop from different type of crop is going to be produced. So that means that since they are going to be producing less, it's going to be produced less emission. And also it's important to mention that in this, all the off-road or the agricultural equipment are being considered under the emissions of transportation. So all of the off-road equipment
Yeah.
are under transportation, and we have separate that. So all the measures that are going to be has for the future, the reduce of the agricultural equipment to be more sustainable in the future, and also that assumption is going to be included in the BAP. But this agriculture is only mean that we are going to be producing less crop, different type of crop, according to the projection of the REMI model.
And I wanted to jump in here, Steve. Thank you for flagging this, because it is such an important sector here in Fresno County. And to your point, there is a lot of research right now about the future of ag in the San Joaquin Valley and the different factors that are, applying to agricultural production, with water and land conversion being the two, kind of top drivers of why we would see ag production and land availability kind of shift into the future. So, ag land that's being converted to housing or solar farms or other types of projects, also limiting that. And so there's some assumption of that in the model and with that GDP. This was the most conservative, like tying it to the GDP projections was the most conservative emissions scenario that we found. And so that's what we're proposing to include in this CCAP kind of baseline inventories to make sure we're accounting for that kind of more of a conservative worst case scenario with those ag emissions continuing in the future, where there is some research that suggests the emissions, or not the emissions, but that ag production could be much more decreased than what's represented here, unfortunately, because of, water shortages or the conversion. So this is a little bit more of a conservative scenario, saying that ag's going to flatline into the future and GDP is going to kind of maintain out till 2050. And that's something we're kind of looking at as how to deal with in the low carbon scenarios that we'll be addressing in the visioning sections coming up too. But definitely really important, and we appreciate any feedback on how to be incorporating that or things to be thinking about here and the inputs and projection side of things for sure.
Sarah, do you have a question?
Yes, I have a more like practical question. I don't know if you mentioned, is this like in a report or something? These are just summary slides, I'm assuming. So it'd be nice to have the actual numbers, and maybe if you're presenting this in the future, because some of the colors I can't even, I think the slivers are so small that I can't even see them. Like I'm not sure if fugitive is maybe really small there in municipal, but it would be nice to know the numbers and also the definitions, because I don't know what fugitive emissions are or where they come from in Fresno County. Usually
Fugitive
I
emissions
associate them with oil and gas.
Yeah, they're associated with gas, so they're essentially natural gas leaks. And so as more natural gas is used, there's an assumption that there will be more fugitive emissions. Also, just wanted to say that we do have an interactive dashboard that we can share with you all at the end of this call, and I pretty much pulled all of these charts from that dashboard, and you can change it to not just be charts, but to be tables and see the exact numbers and things like that. So we're happy to share that with everyone on the steering committee, so you guys can take a more in-depth look if you're interested. Actually, Esteban, will you throw that link in the chat?
Sure.
Well, maybe we'll do it
We
at
don't
the
have
end.
a
So,
chat. Yeah, because
yeah,
we don't have a chat.
right. We'll do it at the end. Okay. Any other questions before we go on to the BAP scenario? I think I saw one just pop up. Is that right? Nicola?
Yeah, thanks. Real quick, would the assumptions be included in that dashboard? Like, can we kind of see like the inputs, or is it just the results?
It's just the results. Yeah. So no assumptions there. Yep. And okay. So here's some other modeling assumptions that I kind of was framing earlier. So as I mentioned, we're going to be including anything that's already been legislated, approved as law, anything that's been funded. Those are all things that can go into the BAP scenario. So assuming that these things have funding, they have grit, they can be applied. So that's going to include things like SB 100, Title 24, CAFE standards at the national level, those in-use off-road diesel regulations. We even have like some regulations around sustainable fuel for aviation included here. A lot of different policies that California has and the county has are included in this piece of it. And also looking at kind of like existing programs. So if there's a home weatherization programs at the county, how many houses a year are they retrofitting? We can use that kind of as a basis for looking at assuming what they're going to be doing in future years as well. So first, looking at California's renewable energy targets and how that applies. We can see here in the model that energy emissions are electricity emissions are completely clean by 2045, aligned with SB 100. So making the assumption that 60% of electricity is generated from renewable sources in 2030, and then 100% are generated from renewables by 2045. So that kind of cleans up the grid here, but we do also see increases in places like diesel and natural gas use a little bit. So this will also be affecting the housing market and as well as some other policies. So here we can see the building emissions drop drastically between the two scenarios, and that's largely due to Title 24 and to the cleaning up the grid, because it's going to be cleaning up our end use types. So anything that relies on electricity in buildings, it's going to have a clean electricity generation. And so that kind of takes those emissions off the grid, essentially. But as you do see here, industrial processes does have a large increase because some of these policies don't necessarily apply to this building type. So in residential and commercial buildings, we can see grid electricity is kind of taken out because it's now clean grid electricity. Natural gas, even though we're going to be adding more buildings, natural gas is kind of maintained, won't be increasing in the same way because of some of these policies. But when it comes to industrial, for example, Title 24 doesn't apply to this building type. So looking at the transportation sector, we can see the policies are going to be lowering the emissions across the transportation sector. So looking at things like Advanced Clean Cars 2, which is going to be requiring new vehicle sales to be zero emission vehicles. Corporate average fuel economy, which is a federal regulation that dictates fuel efficiency in vehicles. Will be supporting that as well. And then some of these other policies that California has around off-road diesel and sustainable aviation fuels are also going to be helping. Just also want to note here, we didn't include some executive orders that aren't quite like set in stone around like heavy duty vehicles. So that's why you're going to be seeing an increase in emissions from heavy trucks. And then going back to the agriculture sector, we did include some existing programs and funding that's already going on that supports reducing emissions in the agriculture sector. So incorporating assumptions around alternative manure management programs, healthy soils initiative, and the state water efficiency and enhancement programs have all been incorporated. And then that is also building off of that assumption that agriculture emissions will already be decreasing, as we saw in the BAU. So an overall comparison of the two, we can see that the BAP is going to be about 10 million tons of CO2 lower than the BAU scenario, so that we can see that there are impacts from these policies and programs already. And then as Esteban kind of showed earlier, that wedge diagram, we can see the different impacts of these policies. Just want to point out here that the projections for vehicles in Fresno County was used from the MFAC, which already incorporates some of the Advanced Clean Car 2 assumptions. So you don't see that directly here, but we do see the CAFE standards having a large impact on personal vehicle use and then heavy duty vehicle use, as well as the electrification, the clean grid initiatives, and then also some smaller reductions from Title 24. So just looking at some opportunities here and thinking about what we might want to strategize for the low carbon scenario, we're only actually reducing energy use by 6%. So one thing to think about as we're planning for the low carbon scenario is going to be looking at like demand side management of energy might be a good approach for us to think about, and how to drive efficiency in an already a very efficient environment. And then again, kind of looking at this by sectors, we can see that transportation is still going to be the biggest sector and will require the most action. Agriculture sector will probably need to drive more funding and programs to help reduce those emissions. And then industry as well will remain the biggest challenges. So there we go. And then just looking at emissions by fuel type, we can see that, as I mentioned, transportation has the largest opportunities to maybe electrify the sector or come up with some different strategies around hydrogen and things like that to address those diesel emissions. Okay, so kind of the BAP. We could open up for questions here.
I think we have a question from Sarah.
Okay.
And then
Yeah, it's in the chat, but Sarah, if you want to unmute and elaborate, or I could repeat it as well for you. But in the chat, Sarah dropped, why doesn't the natural gas go down as California has many programs to retrofit residential and commercial with electric appliances?
We did include those assumptions, but I think when we were looking for data for Fresno County specifically, we found that not as many homes were being retrofitted. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but So we used that number, which was, I think, less than 1,000 homes annually.
Yeah, it was annually 380 houses. About that was the number.
That
380 houses
is
that
that
compared
based
with
on historical or future plans? Because I'm working on this. That's like one of the things I work on and trying to make it happen more here.
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
we
historical.
yeah,
So
Well, yeah, I mean, it hasn't, yeah, okay, so it hasn't started, but I think that the plan should, or yeah, building, what's it called? The something as planned
Businesses.
this is a
might
plan, yeah.
include, yeah, might should include more, but I don't know the number.
Yeah, Sarah, if you have resources that you think would better be better
Yeah,
aligned with this,
I
uh
will, I'll try to see if I can figure it out. I just know that the programs, are, a lot of them have a focus on disadvantaged communities, and it's not guaranteed how many we'll get in Fresno County versus other counties, but so I don't
yeah,
know
I
if
think
there
that
is
that
a
was
number to base it on, that's a real hard number, but like the
I,
equitable building decarb program starts in January, and there's like check Clean California and those things for the heat pumps.
we did look at like some other statewide programs that had already ended, and since there wasn't a continuation of funding, we didn't think it was very appropriate to include them. And so we were basing this mostly, I think, off of some local organizations that were doing home weatherization and some of this like efficiency upgrades. Um, but if you have any plans, I think it's also hard with the state level um, programs to like downscale that necessarily, but it's something we can look into and talk about as well. So yeah, also this is a great opportunity. Like I said, if you see any holes like that, or if you have resources that you think would be helpful for us to incorporate into the model, we're very receptive, and we want to make sure that this is like grounded in the best reality and context of the community as we can. So yeah, anything else, Sarah, before I move on to Moses?
Yeah, thank you. One section I'd like to point out is, and maybe you did cover it, but in the rural areas, there are several agriculture areas that are out of production that they're starting to convert to solar. Westlands Water District, for example, and some of that ag land is not suitable for farming based on the history. And the companies that are coming in to put in this large solar farms, they're also going to mitigate some of the impacts to unincorporated communities with alternative energy, whether it's microtransit or additional modes to help out. And some of these acres are fairly large. I think they're going to make a difference in the rural areas and also with the greenhouse, excuse me, greenhouse gas emissions out there, which affect the entire Fresno County. The other portion I'd like to mention is the fact that with the VMT in rural areas and the use of electric vehicles, there's a larger distance for mileage to be covered. And I think the ARB was lacking in not allowing credits for VMT for electric vehicles, especially with the mitigation measures, whether it be CEQA or any other type of land use decisions. And I think Fresno County could benefit from any of these examples where you have gaps like that that are basically overlooked. And the last one I want to bring up is in your 2050 scenario on the businesses planned, keep in mind that the transit agencies by 2040 need to be 100% electric vehicles. So if you take into account the fleet inventory of just Clovis Transit, FAX, Fresno Area Express, and FCRTA, you're probably looking at 200 to 300 vehicles that in their own right, just by vehicle miles traveled under hydrogen fuel and or electric vehicles, that's going to be a lot of emissions that are going to be mitigated and also need to be credited to Fresno County. And I'm sure the Air District could appreciate that as well.
Yeah, just starting with a couple of points. We did include the electrification of publicly owned vehicles in the model, so that's already incorporated there. We collected a list of all of the cities in Fresno County that have already adopted that standard for themselves as well. So that's already been added. Okay. Well, I'm sorry, what was the one before that? Maybe Jessica can help me out. I know she's taking notes.
That was the one on the solar with the the extensive solar farms.
Right. Okay.
We're talking, thousands of acres, not 100 or 20 or 30. We're talking a vast variety of acreage.
Right. Yeah. So as I mentioned with the businesses planned, we really tried to base that in anything that has teeth. Um, so I'm not sure if that was necessarily incorporated into the scenario like this, but uh, at this point, but it's something we could maybe think about for the low carbon scenario, um, and look and strategize maybe around how we can like separate some of those ag emissions out, because I think right now we're looking specifically at crop production, which is associated with pounds of crops per year, not necessarily acreage. So we'll have to think about how to incorporate that transition. And I think largely our model is based on some of the county's current plans, which the county in their latest plans has established that 96% of agricultural lands will remain agricultural lands. So I think we only included 4% of lands being converted to other uses at this point. So we'll need more data, I think, to be able to address that.
Yeah,
And then also,
the only reason I mentioned that is because some of these companies that are coming out, especially in the west side, and I mentioned Westland's Water District, is because they are going to be transferring that energy, which has a direct impact on the grid, which then causes, a less dependence on the grid as well. And when you're talking about that sizable amount of solar in rural areas, especially if they're going to benefit the unincorporated communities, and then it has that sequence where the dependence on the grid, whether it's 5%, 10% less, maybe more, it has an impact. Don't know the significance of it, but it's definitely well worth mentioning.
yeah, and I think also that as a part of this analysis, we're going to be looking at uh, what they call low income and disadvantaged community benefits, and I think that could be a really great piece to think about there, and how that might they call it LIDAC analysis, how we might be benefiting LIDAC communities, like rural communities.
Okay. And
And
also make the difference
mhm.
probably when the solar plant, if the solar plant is gonna be to be injected into the grid, that is gonna be accounted into the grid emission factor that we are reducing. And if the solar power plant that are gonna be built is gonna be like a solar community, for example, that are gonna be like directly providing energy to those community, that is gonna count as a reduction of the grid electricity consumption from those communities. So that means that those particular community or areas are going to have like less emissions from grid electricity. So we have like these two ways, depend where it's going to be injected the grid, directly to the community or directly to the grid.
Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning only because it is significant. We're talking thousands of acres. It's not, again, small solar farms. And the incentives for these companies to come in and do that, and there's obviously some caveats. They have to give back to the communities. And I know that for a fact because we're a recipient of those mitigation measures as well to provide back into those unincorporated communities. It's worth exploring. I don't know, maybe Mohammed has more from the county of what the requirements are because they obviously come in for permits and also for the development of those farmlands that are out of production.
Yeah, and if we have like more information and data, we can definitely incorporate that. It can be like VIP, if depending if it's already like where if they are already building or if this is on the plan, we can incorporate some of those on the low carbon. If some part of that generation is going to be to the community directly, or it's going to be injected to the grid. I'm guessing that a great part of that is going to be directly injected to the grid since it's big power plant,
I think
and
if you
probably a
check
portion.
if you check with Fresno County, the permitting planning department, and see who's pulled permits for those large scale developments of the solar farms, particularly Westlands Water District and others, they'll probably have all that information. Yeah. Thank you.
I think we're going to take a look on that to see how we can incorporate that into the model.
Also, I just want to say thanks, Moses, for that VMT idea. I think that could be a great way to think about low carbon, an initiative for the low carbon scenario as well. So, Mohammed, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Just wanted to follow up on what Moses mentioned as far as solar farms. There are some solar farms that have been approved or pending on land that is not capable of being farmed mainly within Westlands Water District. Those are really good projects. On the other side of the coin are large acreage of solar farms, or I don't want to call them even farms, solar facilities that are taking out thousands of acres of productive agricultural land out of production for the sake of establishing solar facilities. That's not good for the county of Fresno because agriculture is #1 industry in Fresno County as far as providing employment year-round, which benefits people who live in Fresno County, especially lower-income folks. So that's something to bear in mind. These solar facilities on large acreage of land, they are not community solar facilities. They are huge solar facilities that sell the electricity to the grid. So I'm not sure, what Esteban mentioned that, okay, there are small solar facilities that sell the electricity to people who live in unincorporated communities, which will help them as far as reducing the rates. But what we see here in the county, they are huge solar facilities that they sell the electricity to the grid system. I don't really think it's going to really impact the rates for people who live in small cities or small communities in Fresno County. So, there are two sides to the story that needs to be explored. If you would like to see what's have been approved and what's pending in Fresno County, we can provide that to you. So you can take a look. The other issue that I wanted to mention is regarding solar. We are required, all jurisdiction within Fresno County and other cities, we are required to build homes according to the HCD that each jurisdiction is required to produce a certain number of homes for low income, moderate, and so on and so forth. So those are mandated by state. Now, something that we need to look at is probably providing solar roof mount solar panels, on these homes that directly provide electricity to the house. And if there are any programs or recommendation for providing incentives to the homeowners to actually have those panels on the roof, that really directly helps the homeowners to reduce the electricity that is provided by the grid system.
Yeah, I will say that so Title 24 does require that new homes are built with solar capacity. Um, so that's, I think, a part of that piece of it. We also were considering some of the assumptions around increasing solar on existing houses. I think has slowed as uh, net metering went to net charging. Is that maybe have the wrong language there? But there are some assumptions incorporated that existing buildings will slow their uptake of solar as well. And then to Esteban's point, there are different ways that you see those solar farms interacting with either the community or with the grid. I think we do have like some assumptions already made about uh, the Valley Clean Infrastructure solar farm, if that sounds right. So some of these things have been considered in the model. Just wanted to say that. Yeah, Steve.
Um, can you go back to the prior slide?
This one?
Oh, yes. On the slide, you have non-energy. I was wondering if you could define that as it relates to waste and ag.
Esteban, do you want to define non-energy?
Yeah, so basically are the emissions produced by the land, by the crop, and for the landfills. So all the methane that is produced for the livestock, like the different type of crop that are being produced. So any type of non-energy that is not like classical fuel types, like fossil fuels. So there are emissions coming basically from the landfills and agriculture. There are mainly methane.
What, you talking about PM from dust or
No, I'm talking about
the plant?
methane, the CH4.
Dairies?
And also nitrous oxide as well from like things like
Yeah, nitrous
fertilizer.
oxides and methane.
Yeah, I think what Sarah was saying, it'd be great to have definitions that kind of articulate a little bit more of what's being stated, what's being shown. Because I can make an assumption that you're talking about uh, methane and dairies and what that may mean. Going back to the conversation with Moses and Muhammad, there's different initiatives that are underway. And as you know, various agencies have sometimes conflicting goals, and they converge upon the landowner. So when I think of ag, we're talking about large, significant amount of acreage, but we don't even know how it's going to play out because of SGMA, Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, under DOC, Department of Conservation, and Prop 4 was adopted, 10 billion out of that, 250 million for what's called MLRP, multi-benefit land repurposing. That's going to be competitive, and so there's a lot of uncertainty as to really what's going to be remaining in production. Everybody, it's kind of a swag. Between 500,000 and 1 million acres could go out of production wherever we're cultivating or irrigating. I mean, it's a lot. Ag is not just rows of trees or cantaloupes now. I mean, it is the whole industry, if you want to call it an industry, but that whole economy is up in the air. There's other factors as well relating to commodities and land values. So when I see a number or a table or chart, it's really interesting and probably important to know what's driving that number. Why is so.
Yeah, and the emissions factors associated with the crop types kind of speak to that. So that incorporates like the use of fertilizer, the dehydration of land, the over irrigation, if you will. So, but I will say that these are also just scenarios, and there's a million possible futures, whether
Yeah.
this much land is taken away versus this much land, unless we have like hard data, it's hard for us to um, incorporate that into the model, I would say.
Yeah, it's just, I think part of it is that, the public at large, they're going to see this stuff. Or when you get into public outreach, and the question is being able to, as best as possible, is to describe what it may really mean. So it's not as, quote, nebulous to those looking from the outside in. And those of us who are on the inside are always dealing with complexity. So
Yeah, I think Brenda will probably keep us in check to make sure our language and any outreach materials are accessible to everyone, hopefully. So yeah. Sophia.
Yes. Thanks for the presentation. It's really interesting. I had a question on population assumptions, and my understanding from what you presented is that that's a constant in both scenarios, so that doesn't change. Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
it'll remain the same in the low carbon scenario as well.
Yeah, I was just curious, in general, kind of what you based yours on. I know COG did a study by Applied Development Economics in 2017. And, City of Fresno has what we used in our general plan. And of course, the State Department of Finance has kind of drastically reduced population projections to 0.18 per year of a percent growth. But that's very much in contrast to the RENA goals they've given us. So I'm always just kind of curious as to what you might be using for your population assumptions.
A great question. And actually, we were going to be using those 2017 numbers, but Simran let us in on a little secret that they're revamping their projections. And so she sent us the revamp of all of those projections that are being adopted this year currently. So that's what we're using as the basis for the model.
Is that the revamp by the state or your own internal revamp, or COGS revamp? Sorry.
COGS.
COGS. Okay. Okay. Yeah, well, I'll be interested in following that effort.
Yeah, and it does just spatially as well. It applies to different cities and municipalities in the county differently. So we're using those specific numbers around population growth and as well around job growth for each municipality. And I did just want to say too, Sophia, since you're here and online, we are hoping to be able to kind of make local pathways as well and kind of like take this data and use it to understand a little more what each municipality might be dealing with, kind of framing it within those sectors of the city. So we're hoping to do that in the new year as well and have those conversations.
That'd be great. We definitely like that. So.
We have about less than 15 minutes. So Selena, is it okay if I request that you hold your question for the end so we can allow Southwest Strategies to finish up?
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Just want us to get through the presentation. We can obviously, but it's been great. We've had great discussion and input, and I think this will definitely play a factor as we develop the survey. Spoiler alert.
Absolutely. Okay, so Simran, I will go ahead and turn it over to Jessica to give an outreach update. And everyone, thank you again so much for the comments on the inventory and the modeling there. We'll be taking those comments into account, and then I'm hearing requests for more insight into the assumptions and the inputs in the modeling. So we'll be working with Simran on what we can provide here in the next couple of weeks to support stakeholder review. We weren't sure. Keep in mind, this is initial presentation, high-level review, and we'll be providing additional documentation to help support more more input, more review, and your review on that, because we really appreciate any insight and guidance you all can offer. So
Yeah, just one last thing too, Jessica, piggybacking off of that, is that in the next session, we are hoping to like dive more into the low carbon scenario measures and actions that we can possibly take. And I think maybe showing some of those assumptions and then building off of those assumptions that we've already incorporated into the model could be a useful exercise as well.
definitely. Thanks, Kayla. Awesome. So with that, I'll turn it over just to you, and then I'll wrap up the meeting and the presentation here with some additional next steps.
Great, thank you so much. So we have officially launched outreach. So far this year, we've launched the website with an interactive map, developed a toolkit of materials in various languages, developed a digital toolkit, and conducted some initial pop-up booths in conjunction with some of Fresno Cog's other projects and initiatives. Next slide, please. So we did learn some preliminary lessons from that outreach. One thing that we're looking to do is some more targeted outreach at recurring events. We've done pop-up booths, like I mentioned, at some different events that are sort of like community festivals and that type of thing. But we really want to make sure that we're meeting people where they already are and providing a lot of opportunities for people to not just provide input, but learn more about the CCAP. And do some baseline education about what it is and how they can help inform the development of the plan with their feedback. So as part of that, we are looking at some different recurring events like farmers markets, looking to set up booths on college campuses, not just universities like Fresno State, but also throughout the county. For example, West Hills, Kalinga would be another one. And are really going to be looking to maximize opportunities for input in both cities and rural areas in the county. We would really appreciate any suggestions that this group might have in terms of what events you think would work best. And we're also looking to leverage some third-party relationships to share some of our feedback opportunities, like a survey and links to the public input website with their existing networks to help get the word out. So like I said, we're just looking for support in driving traffic to that website. We can provide some of our different community partners with links when the survey launches, and just looking to get that link out into the community and promote it so that we get a lot of responses and also promote understanding of what we're doing.
Awesome.
Yes.
Thanks so much, Jess. I'm gonna just wrap up a couple real quick next steps, and then we can open it up for questions for the time we have left there. So I did want to point out just for the committee that the QR code here does link to the website for the project on the Fresno Cog website. And that website for public input is also linked here. But just to wrap up, so as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, from here, we're going to be really appreciating your targeted review on the inventory and the projections. We'll be working to continue to refine and finalize those over the next coming months. And in parallel with kind of that foundation of the inventory, the next steps is to move into visioning and goal setting. And like I said at the start of the presentation, we're really looking to hear from the stakeholder steering committee as well as the public on what the ultimate vision for that low carbon scenario for Fresno County could look like, and what type of measures we want to be seeing incorporated into local communities. So with that, looking to really solicit public input on that, we are working on launching a survey, and this is where we really also have a call for help from you all to get the word out about this survey. We will be coordinating with you as that's launched, and we're targeting a launch in early January. And then we're planning to have that survey open for about 6 weeks through till February. And there is some room for extension with that, because what we'd really like to do is have robust public input and time that with some of these outreach events that Jessica was talking about, to make sure we're really getting targeted input and people going to the website and participating in the survey. So we're looking to hear from folks about what their concerns are related to climate change, specifically in their communities or in the county in general, and then get some insight and potential rankings or priorities related to the types of measures that could be implemented for different types of emission sources across sectors. So that's the design of the survey and kind of the intent. So next steps, as that gets finalized and is ready to send out, we'll be coordinating with the Stakeholder Steering Committee with an ask that you share that with your networks, because the more input and participation, the better. And then at our next Stakeholder Steering Committee meeting, what we'd like to focus on is one, any additional input regarding the inventory and projections, and then also hearing from you all about your thoughts on the visioning and the goal setting for the county. So that's going to be the focus of our next committee meeting, which we're targeting for probably late February, and we'd also like to incorporate preliminary results from the public survey as part of that, so we can report out on what we're hearing from the public, how that process is going, and use that to help kind of set the stage for the discussion as well. So those are our next steps. And with that, I can open it up. I think, Steve, we had a question from you, and Selena, you had your hand up earlier, so we could open it up for a couple of last questions before we jump off here.
Well, Selena can go first since she had her hand up earlier.
Yeah, thank you. My question was more for either Kayla or Esteban, if maybe you guys can answer, but do you guys have a more kind of detailed explanation or analysis of what legislative measures you kind of included in the business plan model, or like the measures that you chose to include were already listed on those slides?
So we do have a detailed list of everything that was included in the scenario. That's just a general overview of what we incorporated. So yeah, I mean, I think the only things, I mean, some of the things that we did exclude was anything that hadn't been legislated. So some of the executive orders that currently are existing that have like really ambitious targets around like heavy duty vehicles and things like that weren't included because they don't have any backing, necessarily like funding programs, things like that. But but we do have a full list of everything that was included.
Okay, I know that EPA actually just approved 2 waivers today. One was for, I think you guys already included the Advanced Clean Car 2, but they also approved the heavy duty omnibus waiver as well. So that might be something to consider to include, because I know you said you omitted including anything for heavy duty trucks. So just kind of wanted to throw that out there.
Thanks so much, Selena. And just to follow up on this, I'm hearing a wide range of comments about wanting more detail and more depth beyond just kind of a high level presentation here, which is really exciting. And we really appreciate that interest into this. So what we will be doing as a next step is working with Simran to provide kind of a technical summary of what is going into the inventory and the projections, and providing that out to this group for initial review. So be on the lookout for that to hit your inboxes. Probably just with the holidays and everything like that, it'll be early January, but we're using that to support your review, and definitely taking feedback over the next couple of months as we're working to refine this with all of your guidance. And then Steve, I think, yeah.
Thank you. So Tranquility, our agency, is on the west side, operating out of Kerman, but we're working with all the unincorporated communities such as Raisin City, Perry Colony, the town of Tranquility, and Alkali Flats. Those are the 4 ducks, disadvantaged unincorporated communities under a planning grant from the Strategic Growth Council for what's called Transformative Climate Communities. And it's a 2-year program. We have not gone public. We plan to go public on Tuesday, January 21st. It'd be at the Raisin City School. We got the insurance, everything like that. We've got you on the website, this initiative. I would have dropped it into quote chat, but I don't see it. So a lot of this can be done offline as relates to how we can collaborate. We'll be doing quarterly sessions, and hopefully our first kickoff session will be at the library in the town of Tranquility, either in the latter part of January or early February. But it turns out it's a little bit more difficult to go public way out on the west side. But we're looking forward to working closely with you and your efforts as well.
Yeah,
But
thank
you are on our website already.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve. I can, if you want to send me the materials, I can distribute that with the group. Obviously, we can chat offline and share that with the outreach team for this project if we maybe want to partner and conduct some surveying at that time because it lines up. So thank you for that. I did want to mention, because there was a interactive data link that Esteban and Kayla were willing to share. We could potentially also link that to the hub if it isn't already. And we'll make sure that gets sent out with the meeting materials after today. I hope I can get you guys the meeting notes and recording early next week, if not late next week after the Christmas holidays. So we'll have all of this discussion and presentation annotated for you all in public. So thank you.
Simran, do you have a dedicated page for this project that you're going to post presentations on it? So if people want to follow up?
Yes, so there is a public input website and it has links to our last effort, and I can drop it into the like Q&A little tab at the bottom. But when I send you the meeting notes, I'll like reference it again. Or I could send you the link separately as well if you can't see it in the answered questions thread.
And then the presentations are also posted on that
Yes,
webpage.
yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So I'll make sure to send a follow-up with all of that information and the last stakeholder meeting and today's, because I know we're missing some of the group today.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, with that, I think we're all done. I appreciate you all participating and the lengthy discussion, and your input is very valuable as we move on to the survey and finish the CCAP overall. So thank you, Jessica, Esteban, Kayla, and Jessica for presenting today. With that, I'll go ahead and end the meeting for us all, and happy holidays.
Thank you. Same to you.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.